Look to Walgreens.
Rick Silvestrini and News Center 13, where the news comes first 24 hours a day.
Hello again, I'm Tim Russert, and this is Meet the Press. Our issue this Sunday, the world's trouble spots. Our guest, the President's National Security Advisor, General Brent Scowcroft.
From NBC News, this is Meet the Press with Tim Russert.
The Berlin Wall is down, the Soviet Union is no more, yet the world still seems to be quite a dangerous place. Different, but still dangerous. Russia, Iraq, China, just a few of the areas to be discussed today with our guest, the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, General Brent Scowcroft. Welcome to Meet the Press.
Thank you, Tim.
And joining me at our table this morning, Elizabeth Drew of the New Yorker and Robert Novak of the Chicago Sun-Times. General Scowcroft, let's turn to Russia. Yesterday there was a vote in the Russian parliament. This is the way the first deputy prime minister, Mr. Gaidar, described it. To put it bluntly, today's decision completely revises the course of economic reform. This is the death of any hope of serious cooperation with the outside world in healing our economy. What does this mean for the United States in terms of providing aid to Russia?
Well, first I'd say it's not over. There's been jockeying back and forth ever since the Congress convened. This is a conservative body, elected, appointed before the revolution of last August, and I think Yeltsin has done reasonably well. You remember the Congress started out with a vote of no confidence, which he fairly narrowly beat, and I think he'll come back again. Really what's happened now is he asked for 6 more months of essentially emergency powers when the cabinet would work for him, not be accountable to the Congress. They've said, no, you can have 3. So I don't think it's quite that cataclysmic.
Well, but the vote in the parliament is to rescind some of Mr. Yeltsin's power, and in fact, after July, he would no longer be prime minister in charge of the economic program. If the parliament does not change its course, rescind this vote, can we still go forward and provide economic aid?
Well, I think we have to look and see what really happens. If, in fact, Congress gets control over economic policy, you can assume it will be less reformist, less dramatic than Yeltsin has planned.
And that would affect our...
That would affect it, because one of the reasons that we were able to announce the program is that just the day before we announced, there was a shadow IMF agreement with Russia on the scope of their reforms, making aid that we're proposing a reasonable proposition.
So unless control of the economic reforms remain in the hands of Mr. Yeltsin, and revert back to Mr. Yeltsin after this vote, aid to Russia would be in jeopardy.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. What I'm saying is that the arrangement, however it comes out, has to be such that economic reform can go forward.
How much money are we talking about from the United States?
Well, from the United States, you have first of all, money that's already in the IMF, which in a sense belongs to the United States. We're talking about a little over $1 billion in grain credits. We're talking about a little over $600 million in technical assistance, and that's the bulk of it. It could be, depending on how this all works out, as much as $3 billion.
And how much credit does former President Richard Nixon deserve for helping move this country towards giving aid to what we now call Russia?
I think he deserves some credit, and in this sense that we've been working for months on this particular program, but the one thing that President Nixon did is to get it out of the scope, if you will, of just another economic aid giveaway program, and said how important it was, what a momentous time this was in history, and that we needed to move ahead, because this is more than just aid.
General Scowcroft, now that there is no Soviet Union, what would you say are the top 2 or 3 possible threats to the United States security or interests?
Well, I would say just because there's no Soviet Union does not mean that that is not one of the world's potential trouble spots. And one of the reasons for the program that we announced is to try to help them along the way to democracy and to fundamental change in the orientation of that system.
But where else?
The Middle East is a perennial trouble spot. Korea, we're worried about Korea and the possibilities of North Korean misbehavior. Over the past 50 years, there time and time again when they've done things sort of bizarre in the logic.
And what would we
sense.
do about it if they did that kind of activity again?
Well, I think that the acquisition of nuclear weapons by North Korea would be something we would take very, very seriously. North and the South are now trying to work out inspection regimes and so on to prevent that from happening. We're watching it very closely.
What do you mean take it very, very seriously?
Very, 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 very seriously.
Apparently the administration is not conducting any overall post-Soviet Union review of our foreign policy. Why not? Well,
you know, I saw those pieces. Of course we are. We don't have something with a label U.S. World Foreign Policy. We've been doing it in the area of NATO, in the area of military forces and the scope of the world. Of course we're doing it.
Now, you and the President used to talk a lot about something called the New World Order. Yeah. What happened to that?
Nothing.
Well, you don't talk about it anymore.
Of course we talk about it. You just don't write it anymore.
I don't read it anymore.
Well, look, I think if you look at the broad scope of what we're trying to do, politically, we're trying to advance democracy. It's doing quite well right now. We're trying to support democracy all around the world. Economically, we are pushing hard for an open world economic system, which we think is good not only for the Americans, but for the promotion of trade and world growth, and in a security sense, the sort of New World Order idea where the United States, not the world policeman, we have no appetite nor probably the ability to do that, but as the leader of, if you will, the industrial democracies, a coalition sent through the UN to deal with the political issues of security around the world.
General Scowcroft, just briefly returning to your answers to Tim's questions, do I infer correctly from what you say that if Russia does not follow the guidelines of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which have been so spectacularly unsuccessful in the third world, we don't give them any money?
Well, we have to be very careful, Bob, that we don't pour large amounts of money into a system where there's no expectation that it will be used profitably. That's a very large economy. Unreformed, it can absorb unbelievable amounts of money with no change, which it's done in part already.
I'm asking you, notwithstanding its terrible track record, do you think IMF has the right formula for Russia?
I think IMF, yes, I do.
General, 1 year after our great victory in the Persian Gulf, Saddam Hussein, we find, has anti-aircraft missiles in violation of the UN in the north. He is pounding the dickens out of the Kurds. Are we going to do anything about it, or are we just going to wag our finger at him?
Well, I'm not going to tell you what we're going to do about it. First of all, he's not pounding the dickens out of the Kurds yet, but he's making very ominous preparations up there. He has installed some surface-to-air missiles in the zone, in the prohibited zone for
what are we going to do about
flying.
That?
We're talking with our allies.
Is it possible to take military action on that?
I wouldn't rule anything out.
So you wouldn't rule that out?
I would not rule it out.
No. Now, the development 1 year after the war is over a lot of people believe that Iran has become in fact, the Director of Central Intelligence, Mr. Gates, is indicating that Iran is becoming the regional superpower. Is that alarming to U.S. interests?
Well, there are some troublesome indications about Iran and the direction that it may be going. First of all, they do have a very massive military buildup program going on. There have been disquieting signs of a turn away from what we conveniently call the Rafsanjani program of moderation. But the election, which started yesterday, I think what you could call moderates seem to have done quite well. I think we need to reserve judgment on Iran for the moment.
In that connection, sir, we used to use Iraq as a kind of counterweight against Iran.
Yes.
Who's our counterweight now?
Against Iran?
Yes, sir.
We don't have a particular counterweight, not in the sense that Iraq was, but we're building stability in the region. We still have significant force there, and I think one of the things that we have demonstrated is our ability to come to the aid of any gross instabilities which develop in the region.
General, I want to make sure I have this clear. If the Iraqi anti-aircraft guns shot at American reconnaissance flights, we would respond in kind.
I don't want you to have it too clear. As I told Elizabeth, we will take it very seriously, and they will not get away with anything.
Let me ask one other question about the war, coming from another perspective. What would you say to the women and children of Iraq who, for no fault of their own, live under this despot, who are having a hard time with getting food and medicine and trying to survive?
I think they ought to tell their mothers and daddies to get rid of him. We are not.
Well, what do they do in the meantime?
We are not keeping any food, medicine, any of those things from the Iraqi people. Saddam Hussein is. He's stockpiling it in different places. He's distributing it only to his friends. That's the problem. It's not that the United States is starving out the people of Iraq, against whom we have no problem.
We're going to have to take a break for just a minute. We'll be back with General Scowcroft in a few moments.
Meet the Press is sponsored by GE. From plastics to financial services, we bring good things to life.
Every 7 seconds of every day, someone is going somewhere with GE because over 200 of the world's airlines rely on the power of GE jet engines.
Tokyo and Kokomo and Marrakesh and Budapest and Sydney, Monte Carlo, San Diego, Santiago, Barcelona, Arizona, Bora Bora, Glacamora, and Siena, and Vienna, and New York and County Cork. GE in the air, we'll be there.
And since every year more and more people are going to more and more places, GE has developed the jet engine of the future, the GE90. More powerful, more fuel efficient, cleaner, and quieter than any jet engine ever made.
St. Petersburg and Uruguay and Malibu and Paraguay and Rome and Santa Fe and Cincinnati and LA, and there is Canada and Malaga and Rimini and Brindisi, New Delhi, Kansas City, and a town without a penny. GE in the air, we'll be there.
GE, coming every 7 seconds to an airport near you.
We're back talking to the man who advises George Bush on national security affairs, General Brent Scowcroft. General, let me turn to China. Senator Claiborne Pell, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator David Bourne, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, both senators charged with foreign policy oversight of this country, were denied visas to travel to China. How would you describe that action by the Chinese government?
Not very smart.
And what will be the consequences?
I think the consequences will be, this is just a guess, that the two senators will be allowed to go to China.
If they are not allowed to travel, will we hold up most favored nation status from the Chinese in July when it's up for renewal?
Well, it certainly won't help its course through the Congress, whatever the president does.
What would you recommend?
But I think what really happened there is that the Chinese viewed this as just a political gambit against Tibet, whether it was or was not. And of course, they're very sensitive about that. But I think it was made at the bureaucratic level, and we're working on it.
So the most favored nation status would be in jeopardy unless the visas were granted.
Oh, yes. Well, it's in jeopardy anyway.
Let me ask you another question on the same subject. William Broomfield, the ranking Republican on the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, had this to say, a Republican now: we can't go along doing business as usual with this outlaw regime. Do you think the regime in China is outlaw at this point?
Well, it certainly is, for the standards which we apply to ourselves and to our friends. I think one of the things, they are not doing the kinds of things, especially in human rights, that we would like. We have had problems with them on missile technology transfers. We've had trade problems.
They promised Secretary of State Baker, that they would stop shipping missiles to the Middle East. Is there any evidence that they've done that?
Yes.
There is?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
How would you rate...
Since they formally agreed to join the Missile Technology Control Regime, yes, is evidence. We're going to be watching it very closely.
In light of the visa denial, and in light of Congressman Broomfield's comments, how would you rate administration policy towards China right now?
I would say that if we have some time, it is being successful. And what is really happening is down in the south of China, entrepreneurial economic systems are thriving. That is a booming area. It is a demonstration, even to the hardliners in China, what free enterprise can do. Eventually, that will be, I think, triumphant in the political as well as the economic regime. And that's what preserving MFN has done for us. When we started MFN under President Carter, started granting it on a provisional basis, about 85 to 90% of all the entities that we did business with were government-owned. Now it's well under 50%. I mean, that's dramatic progress. And in a country the size of China, sure, it's taken a long time. Sure, it's going slowly. I think we're on the right track.
General Scowcroft, there was a report out of the Pentagon last week that some of the weapons used in the Gulf War did not perform as advertised at the time. I wonder what you think about this. Doesn't this set up another credibility problem next time we're told that weapons work? Was it worth it?
Well, I'll be honest, I have not yet seen the report, but nothing works as advertised. I have to look at it very carefully, but I think in the exuberance of the first days, you know, where people were sitting in Baghdad and say they saw cruise missiles coming down the street, turning right at the intersection and destroying buildings, you know, that's a little hyperbole. I think we have every reason to be pleased with the performance of especially our high-tech weapon systems in this war. I haven't seen anything which would indicate the way it has sometimes in the past that our really great systems don't work.
Manuel Noriega was convicted last week, as you are well aware. Yet there are reports that there is as much drug running and money laundering in Panama as ever before, perhaps as much. And we had to lighten sentences on about 16 drug kingpins in order to get his conviction. So what have we achieved?
I think we've achieved a great deal. First of all, he's out of there. It was a detestable regime. We have democracy in Panama. They have a growth rate over the last year of 9%. Unemployment is down 20 points. Drug dealing is down dramatically. It has not been wiped out. It is down dramatically.
Bill Clinton gave a foreign policy speech this last week, as I'm sure you're aware. And among the things he said were that Japan and Germany should be given permanent seats in the Security Council. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I think sooner or later we're going to have to look very hard at the makeup of the Security Council. But I mean, you talk about about a thorny problem. No, but it's not that simple. Then what do you do with India? You know, how do you get the right kind of representation? Should, for example, maybe Europe just ought to have an EC seat rather than an individual country. But these things ought to be looked at very carefully and at length so that we don't do something which destroys what, at least over the last year and a half, has been an extremely useful instrument.
General Scowcroft, the Inspector General of the State Department found evidence of technology transfer of U.S. technology by Israel to other countries, including China. This was overridden by the political leadership of the State Department. Wasn't this an election year act by the State Department, particularly when General Clinton is accusing Secretary of State Baker of encouraging overt anti-Semitism?
You mean what?
Overriding the Inspector General.
Overriding? Well, the Inspector General really wasn't overridden. The report is out.
Well, so, but the Secretary of State, the State Department announced there was no technology transfer. There was no evidence of it when there was evidence.
No, there was. No, I think I don't know what you're talking about. The Patriots is a special case. There's a case dealing with South Africa, but many of the other reports are still out and in the.
Well, let me ask you a flat question. In your opinion, was there technology transfer of Patriot technology by Israel to China?
Let me put it this way. there were allegations of it. And we sent a team over, investigated those allegations, and the team came back and said they found absolutely no evidence to support those allegations.
But Chinese officials are saying there was that transfer, and the Pentagon has made statements that they suggest that there was.
What we have right now are allegations and an inspection, and I think I just have to leave it right there.
Maybe you can explain one other thing to me, sir, in regard to China, that we are tolerating, we're continuing relations with this brutal dictatorship, and when the elected president of Peru, President Fujimori, with wide popular consent, is trying to crack down, we immediately cut off aid. That isn't very consistent as a U.S. policy, is it?
Yes, I think it's consistent policy. That's a very difficult situation. Fujimori is trying to do the kinds of things that we want done. He's trying to crack down on drugs, economic reform, all those kinds of things. But the problem is that it is extremely dangerous to try to save democracy by destroying democracy.
We know better than he does?
No, we don't. But we have a hemisphere now, the whole of Latin America, that is democratic. It is fragile. There are assaults on it in various places. Haiti, it was overthrown. There was an attack on democracy in Venezuela. We have to be very careful that we don't give encouragement to forces, even for good reasons, who want to do the kinds of things that destroy democracy. The heart of democracy is that the rules are more important than winning.
General Scowcroft, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us this morning on Meet the Press.
It's my pleasure.
And in a moment, Elizabeth Drew, Bob Novak, and I will be back to talk some presidential politics.
It's called the ripple effect. The way one isolated action can set so many others in motion. You see it in nature, and you can see it in this country's economy, too. When we export our precious resources in their raw form, the benefits are fleeting and few. But when they're processed first and given added value, the momentum is undeniable. Productivity increases, our balance of trade grows ever stronger, and wave after wave of new jobs is created. Not just in processing, but in everything from transportation to financial services, packaging to construction. In fact, studies predict that if just 10% more of our agricultural exports were traded as value-added products, 100,000 new jobs would be created, personal income would swell by more than $2 billion, and gross output would grow by an additional $5 billion. All within these shores. He was 50 when it happened. In 3 months, he went from perfect vision to almost total blindness. In test after test, doctors were at a loss. Finally, a test was done using GE's revolutionary magnetic resonance imager. Look at this. Incredible. The doctors discovered a tumor affecting his optic nerves, and he was treated. Within days, he got his vision back.
Hey, what a smile.
And everything that came with it.
Elizabeth, Bob, from foreign policy to politics. Bill Clinton's going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party.
So it seems.
Does he have a chance against George Bush?
Well, I don't think it'd be right to say he has no chance. He has a big struggle ahead of him. And it could be a close and very tough election, in which Clinton has showed us that he doesn't give up easily and that he's very tough. But if it's a close election, in those big electoral vote states, if he has so much as a 3% or more drag on him because people are bothered by some of the personal stories or what has come to be called his character, then he's going to lose.
He has to get the character issue behind him and move to the issue of change in order to have any real chance here.
He does, and that's very difficult. It's one thing to persuade the public that somebody isn't a wimp, to take a wild example, but to persuade people that he's honest when there are these sort of stories where he's shaded the truth a little bit is much harder.
Two toughest things in politics to overcome, the notion of integrity or intelligence. Lack of each, and you're in real trouble. Bob, Ross Perot was in town Friday. You had a chance to talk with him. Is he going to run, and should he be taken seriously?
Yes and yes. I believe he will run. I believe he's going to get his name on all 50 ballots. That is not an Olympic feat to do that. Secondly, he should be taken seriously. He should be taken a great deal more seriously than I think he's being taken by the conventional wisdom inside Washington, because of the fact that there is a lot of negative feeling about both President Bush and Governor Clinton.
Who does he hurt more, President Bush or Governor Clinton?
I don't think you can tell right now. The exit polls out of New York last Tuesday, or out of Wisconsin Tuesday, indicated 30% out of all Democratic voters would vote for Ross Perot. The problem with Ross Perot, Tim, is that he has not yet decided what he thinks on a lot of issues. In a lot of ways, that's charming, considering the way the politicians have pat answers, but he has a dynamism and a feeling that here is a leader that makes him a serious contender.
Lars Eric Nelson of the Daily News had a comment the other day saying that the only time our current political leaders sound intelligent or logical or believable is when they're leaving office. We have seen a rash of people leaving Washington, Senator Worth, Congressman Weber, Senator Rudman. More of that to come, Elizabeth?
Probably, but I think the stories may be a little bit more mixed than what these people are telling us, that there could be other reasons that they're leaving. And I think it also suggests some admiration is in order for the people who want to stay in and keep trying to change this country.
Keep slogging on the tough fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Elizabeth, Bob, thanks for coming by. That's it for today. We'll be back next week. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. See you then.
If you took out everything we make for a loaf of bread, it wouldn't be a loaf of bread. If you took out everything we make for a jar of peanut butter, it wouldn't be a jar of peanut butter. The fact is, a lot of foods and beverages just wouldn't be the same without the ingredients we make at the Archer Daniels Midland Company. Flours, sweeteners, vegetable oils, soy proteins, as well as livestock and poultry feeds, which provide for meat, eggs, and dairy products. At ADM, we produce hundreds of popular food ingredients from America's most abundant crops, and we produce them efficiently, so that food doesn't end up taking too big a bite out of your budget. You won't find the name ADM on your grocer's shelves, but from now on, you'll know we're there. ADM, supermarket to the world.
It's Grand Central Station. It's Carnegie Hall. It's a late-night bistro and a banquet hall for 50. It's a GE Monogram kitchen with GE Monogram appliances of such dramatic beauty and original style they have no equal. So with Monogram appliances, your kitchen can be everything you ever dreamed it could be. Because you may call it a kitchen, but at GE, we know it's really your living room.
Meet the Press has been sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, supermarket to the world. For a printed transcript of Meet the Press, send $1 and a stamped self-addressed envelope to Kelly Press, Box 12160, Silver Spring, Maryland, 20908.
Dateline, the IRS. He was an average taxpayer, muscled for more money. They threatened to ruin his life.
They took it all away from him.
To save his family, to collect the insurance.
Alex took his life in June.
But the IRS had made a mistake, a deadly mistake.
They've destroyed his life. They've destroyed my life.
And it could happen to you. Dateline, NBC, Tuesday.
Want home cooking? Look no more. See what the Machine Shed has in store. There's juicy pork with plenty of stuff and thick Iowa steak, and that ain't nothing. From hearty breakfast right through dinner, the Machine Shed is a first-class winner. Besides great food, the shed is fun. There's smiles and laughter for everyone. Come on in. No need to roam. The Iowa Machine Shed is your home away from home.
Look for springtime savings this week at Walgreens. Get a great price and a close shave with the Gillette Sensor Razor. Just $2.99. Pringles snacks are on sale too. Choose from these great flavors, just 99 cents.